Hi friends, I'm Raffian Titman, Executive Director of Friends of the Wissahickon, and we are thrilled tonight to present our Valley Talk, Lenape, a Living Language. And this is a follow-up to a fabulous conversation we had in the spring with the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. And tonight we have Shelley Depaul, who's worked with the Lenape Nation since 2004 as their genealogy researcher, historical researcher, Lenape language specialist and educator, and is currently Chief of Education and Language on the Council of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Shelley. So glad to have you here.
Wanishi, thank you.
Tonight, folks, we're going to do things a little less formal than we normally do in our Valley Talks. We're going to have a great conversation. As you may have already noticed, we are recording. And so I'll ask that if you're uncomfortable having yourself on view, although we love to see you, you can turn off your cameras. And the recording will be available to watch again or to share with your friends. Another little point of housekeeping, we are going to facilitate this conversation utilizing a question form that is in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that as we go along. So check out the chat, put your questions in the form, and behind the scenes, FOW staff will be, looking at questions and making sure that we're getting them all in and avoiding duplication and having a fabulous conversation. And I know Shelley is so willing to kind of see where the questions take us in this conversation. And I think those are our housekeeping issues. I think most folks know Friends of the Wissahickon. We work in partnership with many nonprofits and organizations. Our partner with the City of Philadelphia is Parks and Recreation. We also work with the Water Department. We rely on funding and volunteer hours from our nearly 3,000 members. And we also partner beyond our city partners, and the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania and the Friends of the Wissahickon have been great friends, I think, for a very long time, but certainly formally since around 2002 with the Treaty of Renewed Friendship. And we are so honored and grateful to learn and work with the Lenape Nation. And I am so happy to have everyone with us tonight. We had over 300 folks join us in the spring, and I think we're getting close to several hundred folks here tonight. So again, welcome, Shelley. And we'll kick this off. So I think one of the things to get us started is maybe letting us know, how did your journey on the language begin?
My journey on the language. Well, I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'd like to backtrack and just talk about who the Lenape Nation is.
Well, we can certainly start there too. I'm sorry to have dived right in. I was so excited.
That's okay. We'll save that question then.
Okay, I'll save it.
So I just wanted to, I don't know how much you might know about the Lenape people and their history, but I belong to the Council of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. And we are descended from early marriages that happened largely in my area between German settlers and the Lenape women. And these marriages took place in the 1600s all the way up to the late 1700s. So these German Lenape families were established pretty much way before the removal. There were two removals of the Lenape in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And at that point, the government had removed us to, it's a long story, but we moved to Kansas. And then we were there for about 50 years. And then as the frontier, kept moving westward, they moved us again. And finally, to make a very long story short, if you have any questions about this or anything else as I talk tonight, please just ask me as we go. But they wound up eventually in Oklahoma, and the only two federally recognized tribes of the Lenape are in Oklahoma today.
Okay.
So the diaspora worked in a number of ways. Some of our people went north to Canada. There are two Canadian groups up there now. Some of us were moved to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and then those people had to move further west, and they wound up in Wisconsin now, and they are federally recognized as well. And then there were just a number of Lenape communities. I mean, you can imagine the Lenape removal isn't the Trail of Tears. That's actually the Cherokee. But we had the same sort of situation. And on our way moving westward, many people just decided not to go all the way and stopped at little groups along the way. So they got as far as the Allegheny Mountains and said, hey, we could lose ourselves here for a long time. And the Allegheny Mountains are still very much like that. They're beautiful, they're remote. And so you have communities in the Allegheny Mountains, Western PA, you've got them in Ohio, you've got them in Indiana, there are still some in Canada. And then, as I said, the ones that made it all the way to Oklahoma are two of the federally recognized groups. There are groups in New Jersey, two groups in New Jersey that are state recognized. So each of these tribes, they have their own history from that point on of what has happened in their particular communities. So I would like to talk about our community, which again, are the Lenape that remained here. And of course, in the beginning, the Lenape got along very well. The German farmers that moved over here, they liked to choose Lenape women as their mates because they were very good with the planting, with the corn, with the herbal medicines. They just because the Germans that came here, the particular ones that I'm talking about were farmers. And they came in through Philadelphia. I even have the names of the ships that they came in on, some of our ancestors. And they quickly moved up to the frontier, which would be this area. The Pocono area was definitely, and because they wanted to farm. And so these early Lenape German families, and there are many others. I mean, the Irish, there's a lot of stories too, but this is my particular heritage. And a lot of the people from the area that I live in are descended from these German Lenape marriages. So they spoke each other's language. And I have a little story to tell that was just priceless. I did a talk for the University of Pennsylvania on the language, and I was just sort of skirting through their archives. And I found this little story where it was in a diary, Bropst, B-R-O-P-T-S, I think it was, or S-T, I mean. But apparently there was an Indian in the woods, a Lenape Indian in the woods, and he was watching a German farmer who was farming his land. And each day he got a little closer to the woods. And then when he got close enough, the Indian sprung upon him and was about ready to shoot his bow at him. And the farmer yelled out, "Shoo sneaked, shoo sneaked." And the Native American and the Lenape replied, "Dost thou do sprechen?" So basically what he meant, it's proof. I mean, we have known this in our oral histories, but this is just one of those little gems of proof that I found that the early Lenape got along well with the Germans. And linguistically, those early families, their households were German Lenape speaking families at that point. So they, excuse me, spoke each other's language. So once again, these families were firmly established before the removal of the Lenape. So, you know, a lot of textbooks are going to say there's no Lenape left in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so this is where we like to correct that history, you know, and explain to them that that there were many Lenape families that started way back then. Of course, we were not really permitted. We had to assimilate. So we were not permitted to really, it just wasn't wise, I should say, to practice our religion, to practice our culture. And as time went by, obviously one of the most important things in our culture, which is the language, that had to fall by the wayside because, you know, we really couldn't speak our language. But in the process of assimilating, and I don't know if it was discussed that there's an exhibit that was originally at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years that tells the story of the Lenape and in Pennsylvania. And basically it follows one of our old stories or prophecies, if you want to say that, of the 4 crows.
Okay.
And quickly, I'll just explain that, tell that little story, and that is that a fox will be loose upon the land. 4 crows will come. The first crow flew in harmony with Creator. The second crow got sick and died. The third crow saw what happened to his brother, the second crow, and went into hiding. And the fourth crow came out and lived in harmony with Creator again. So we sort of, our Chief Bob sort of interprets this story to mean that this is sort of the 4 times of Lenape. When we flew in harmony with Creator, that would have been pre-colonial contact. The second crow that died, that is during contact and died in many ways, losing of our culture, our language, our home, our land. And then, so the third crow, when we went into hiding, that really best tells the story of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, the Lenape that remained here. And during that time, outwardly, we could not practice much of our culture. But many of our people were very devout about making sure that they did pass down as much of the traditions as they could. And so they had to do that in hiding, and hiding in plain sight. So just to give you an example of a few of the ways that they did that, it's a tradition among our people that the grandparents teach the children, because mom and dad are real busy, you know, hunting and cooking and that kind of thing. It's just really traditional for the grandparents to teach the children. And so the grandmothers would make a little rag doll, and it just looked like a little rag doll, and they would give that to their granddaughters. And if you pulled the hair up in the back, you would see a face stitched there, the same color as the skin, which would teach the child, you show one face, you know, to the world, and you keep these teachings secret. There are many other artifacts too. I don't want to go through all of them, but we had a stencil that would go, it looked just like a German stencil, and it would be nice if I had a picture of this, but I don't. But I can, if anyone's interested, I can share that some other time.
I think people are very interested in folks. So if we get things followed up from this talk, we'll be happy to share them or put it in our e-newsletter that we distribute. So I'd be happy to do that.
Sure. So anyway, the stencil, basically, it kind of looked German, but it had a dot with 4 little squares on it. And then sort of like an arrow type shape with a dot. The dot in Lenape art is the soul. So basically it was in Lenape red. It had to be Lenape red, which is sort of a dark red. And it had to be face level it had to be in your kitchen at face level. So you would know, you know, only Lenape knew to do that. But anyway, the four directions and the dot were the soul of Creator, and then of course the other one was a dancer or a person, the soul of the dancer, and that would be, you know, in their kitchen. They would paint their ceiling blue, their walls green, their floor brown, sort of to simulate the outside. They would have a cedar tree, most likely somewhere. Cedars are very sacred to us, and they're, you know, we do a lot of our ceremonies with rocks and definitely a circle. So they would put rocks around their flower garden so it wouldn't look like a circle. It wouldn't look like a.
So these were all kind of subtle indicators that other people in the know, other members of the community would be able to see without without saying or blasting it out that you have family here, we're part of the community.
Exactly. And also it was just a comfort to ourselves to have
Right.
that much of our culture around us,
Sure.
at least.
Yeah.
But we believe, as some other religions do, that when you put the prayer circle was with rocks, when you put a prayer in a rock, the rock remembers it. We have a great reverence for rocks. We call them the grandfathers. And so those stones became sacred. And so the elders would pass them along to the next generation, and the next generation would then use those same rocks. And we do have an elder in our community who still has her great grandmother's rocks from that hiding time. So I don't want to spend too much more time on it. Leave it just to say that we did find ways of passing our culture along. And then just to finish the story, as far as the fourth crow goes, and that's what we consider ourselves in now, where we live in harmony with Creator again. Our Chief Bob feels that the fourth crow began with the first river journey, which was back in 2002. And since then, we have started to form relationships with so many wonderful people, individuals, churches, conservancies, organizations such as the Friends of the Wissahickon. In our first, the treaty happens every 4 years. So in the first treaty, we had about 19 organizations. That was in 2002, and it goes on every 4 years. And then we've got over 50 organizations and hundreds of individuals now that have signed the treaty. So it keeps on growing. We also take a river journey every 4 years. And so we meet with our partners all along the river, or anyone else who we take the treaty with us who wants to sign the treaty. But also, just as Friends of the Wissahickon is doing now, as we go down the river, other organizations we will call them out to discuss what's going on in their particular part of the river or that community.
A wonderful event that really highlights all the ways we're connected through the water. And I think there's some great information on the past journeys, and hopefully folks will check out the website and see. I think you have one coming up in 2022.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and it looks like loads of fun. I know a few of our staff members are trying to figure out how they can get in on it.
Well, if you don't mind, Adam, I'd like to introduce my son, Adam, here, and he is the coordinator of the river journey.
Yes.
So I think,
and a good friend of the Wissahickon too.
Right, exactly. So if you have questions about that, how you can participate in the river journey or sign the treaty, Adam would be good to get in touch with. And I think Adam, they can do that via our website. And just attention, Adam.
Excellent.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry. I didn't realize I could unmute myself. Yes, I'll also put my email in the chat, but you can also get in touch with us through the website.
Fabulous. Hi, Adam. Good to see you.
Great to see you and everyone else.
Yes, we have a lot of folks here, and a few joined us after Shelley and I started talking. And so I'm just going to give a reminder that if you have questions, there's a form in the chat, and we'll start diving into them. And okay, back over to you, Shelley. Oh, you're muted.
Okay,
there you are.
So I just wanted to give you an idea of who the Lenape Nation, who we are. And
I appreciate that. I think you've done a great job of putting, well, one, that the Lenape have been here continuously through the the human history evolution here in this region, and that are all around our country. And we have some federally recognized and state recognized, and then folks who are organizing and pulling together and moving in that direction. But if we circle back to your story with the language, if you don't mind starting with yourself and how did you start yourself off in the language? And it sounds like you had to be a detective.
Yeah, it was quite a long journey. It actually began, I mean, I'm a history major, my master's in history, and I've studied many cultures. My thesis was on Ireland at the time, and that was back in 1983. I always believed that if you study a culture, you really need to get somewhat of the language too. You need to study somewhat of the language because the language is really important. It's an artifact, it's an artifact that can't be changed and can't be messed with, and it tells you a lot. But actually, I was studying Gaelic because of, I was working on my thesis. And I was out on the river one day and I was trying to kind of test myself by naming, the river and different things around me in Gaelic. And it was almost kind of like an epiphany because all of a sudden I sort of realized that I don't even know my own words for these things. So at that point, I dropped Gaelic and started trying to learn Lenape words for things. And at that time, there really wasn't much. I had never taken a Native American language before. And if any of you have to realize that it's not at all like English. It's not linear, it's conceptual. One word means a lot, a whole sentence, a whole thought. Really, I shouldn't even say a sentence of thought. So it took me a while to just get used to that. And so I would, I got what dictionaries I could, and most of them were Muncie dialect. And, they were just dictionaries. They really didn't show you how to put the language together.
Okay.
So basically I had to take the words and look at the endings and kind of figure out on my set for myself how it was put together. And then as time went by, a good friend of mine who was an Apache guy, his name is Don Wild Eagle. He's just a wonderful friend. He gifted me with Nora Thompson Dean's lessons.
Okay.
Nora Thompson Dean is an elder who was a fluent speaker living in Oklahoma, who was very much interested in preserving the language. And so she put out a little language book, 2 of them actually. And so that was wonderful. It came with the audio, so I could actually hear how the language was spoken. And that was kind of like when Helen Keller put her hands under the water.
Yeah.
Because I had been reading it, and I was even looking at these linguists' phonetics and trying to pronounce it, but you can't get anywhere close. And
you have to, well, we all learn our language through speaking. We don't read first. We speak first, right?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So so it was at that point that there were a lot of decisions I had to make. There are a few dialects. Now really the only 2 that exist are the Muncie dialect, which is the northern dialect, and the Unami dialect, which is the southern dialect.
And are they very different? I'm just going to interject because I see a question that perfectly pairs with where you are, which is, what are the differences between those dialects?
Many of the words actually sound the same if you just listen. Yeah. But you have to realize that the people that collected these languages were linguists, and each of them had their own way of spelling the language.
Okay.
So many words are very similar, but if you the Muncie dialect uses this double vowel system, which is really difficult to read and to get the sounds from. So that's one of the main differences, the way that the language was recorded. Excuse me. And I've collected almost everything that's out there from just about every linguist, and they each have their own system. There's Vogelin, there's Goddard, there's Jim Rementer, there's Nora Thompson Dean, a number of different linguists. And then you could go all the way back to Zeisberger, who was one of the Moravian missionaries. And I should actually mention that because it's an interesting historical fact, but obviously we did not write our language down.
Right.
It was just oral. But the Moravian missionaries were trying to convert our people to Christianity. And so in the process, they translated the Bible into Lenape.
Okay, of course.
And so this is one of the reasons that it has been saved to us, because these linguists wrote it down. We never did. So in a way, it was very helpful. And most of the Muncie dialect comes from the Zeisberger, Heckwelder, these early missionaries, comes from their writings.
Okay.
And then, as I said, the Southern Unami dialect, Nora Thompson Dean is the big one. You know, she started the language. She she had the audio recordings, and the way she spelled the language. So once I heard her, I had decided to go with the Southern Unami dialect. It just, I picked it up very quickly after that. And then as time went on, Rementer did a grammar, and now we have the Lenape Talking Dictionary. And it's so much fun. Even if you just want to know a few words in Lenape, just go to talklenape.com, I think it is. And you can just plug in words there. And so that has been, the work that Jim Rementer has done has been very helpful, especially the Lenape Talking Dictionary. My students are pretty much addicted to it now. So yeah, I mean, then, you know, I started out that after that, it occurred to me that that was my calling, because I loved the language so much. You know, it just, so I tried, after I learned enough myself, I tried starting a Yahoo group back in, I don't know, probably about the same time, 2002, 2005, maybe. So we had a little Yahoo group, and I started sending lessons out, weekly lessons, because many of our people homeschooled. Okay. So I tried to guide it towards helping them teach their children. So it actually was daily lessons back then, and it's kind of changed quite a bit now. But that was my main goal, just to get our people, you know, to speak Lenape, and so that they could teach their children. And so I would put out lessons every week, but I talked to our elders about, you know, what would you like to say? And then I came up with like 24 lessons based on, you know, what they thought they would like to say, you know. So we have readings, and we've got, you know, give me this and give me that, and what you read. And a lot of weather terms, that kind of thing. And a lot of songs. We would sing songs, and that's what the kids love the best.
Well, and that's a great way to learn a language, right? Through songs.
Yeah, they learn a lot more through that. And not only the children, the elders. The elders enjoyed singing songs too. But I wanted to take kind of a holistic approach to teaching the language. I wanted to involve everyone, because it can be, I'm also a very gentle teacher. I have to say that one of our other teachers of Muncie dialect was very strict, and so everybody was afraid to speak. So I try to be very gentle in teaching the language and working out, you know, what we're going to do. But also, it's good to just continue to use the whole community. So, you know, we'd maybe study certain words about directions or whatever. And then the elders would teach the lessons about the directions and what that meant spiritually. And so, so everyone could take part in explaining things and learning words, you know, softly and gently. But anyway, to make a long story short, and I'm going to finish up and let you guys ask some questions. So I came up with these 24 lessons. So I sort of basically had a curriculum. And we have always been good friends with the University of Pennsylvania, and they had come to return to us a paddle that they had in their museum. And when they were there, we got talking, and then it was Bob Purcell, who was at that time curator of the museum there. He found out through our conversation that I had developed a curriculum. And so he invited me to come to an Indigenous Languages conference at Penn to present my story and how I came upon it, and the curriculum and everything. And so at that point, there was a professor from Swarthmore who was at that particular conference, who then came up to me afterwards and asked me if I would like to teach the curriculum at Swarthmore. The particular conference that I went to was basically dealing with how academia can help Indigenous languages. So, or the relationship between academia and native languages. So anyway, it was amazing, and I wound up at Swarthmore. I had to develop a lot more curriculum now because basically I try very hard to stay away from grammar and grammatical. It doesn't work anyway with Lenape, but well, it kind of does if you really know. But that's when, I mean, I'm very aware of not frustrating people, not turning them off.
Okay.
You know, so I don't hit them with things like conjugations, and then I do with the advanced students once we get to that point. You know, I mean, I know who I can throw that at,
right,
and who not to throw that at.
Well, as someone who always struggled learning languages, that sounds, I'm appreciative of that style.
Exactly. And so anyway, I'm even teaching English. I mean, my bachelor's is in English. You know, there's a lot to be said for teaching by model rather than grammar, you know, so that's basically, you know, how the language lessons are developed. I don't use a lot of grammatical, but once I started teaching at Swarthmore, these kids needed that. They needed the grammar. So then I had to come up with a second text of advanced lessons for them. So it's developed, and this is the book that we use now.
Okay.
And then when I taught at Swarthmore, I feel that as a teacher, I learn as much as I teach. And so the students there were, a lot of them were linguists, and they had ideas about how we could improve the book. Some of them did verb exercises, some of them did oral exercises, some of them did word games. And for their finals, they had to write a story. So we've actually included some of those stories as translations in the text. So I like to give credit to everyone who contributed. You know, the students contributed to the text too, and are still continue, you know, now that we're doing it now.
And this is the book that you've now compiled all these lessons and this work into a textbook, and it's my understanding you're having it published.
Yeah, we have it printed ourselves.
You have it printed, and
this is the book we use for our lessons now.
Right. So folks, if you're interested in a lesson, or if you're interested in a lesson and you take one, I think you're going to need the book. And if you're just interested in the book, for both of those things, Shelley has generously offered, you can just email her and work out how to purchase a copy of the book if it's available. I'm sure you may need to print more.
No, we'll see. That's what I'm wondering.
Given the enthusiasm that we've seen on this topic.
So if you're going to email me, if you're interested in the book, write language book. And if you're in the subject, and if you're interested in taking languages, the language class, write language class.
Yes.
And
help Shelley sort her inbox, folks, so have a clear subject line on there.
Yes,
in that way. And you can see the email address here is the final comment. And I do see I have a lot of questions in the chat. I have a lot of questions on my sheet. Okay. And should I just start firing them away?
Yeah, you may as well. I've said pretty much what I wanted to say. Yeah.
All right. We have a few questions about, well, one is about songs. Is there somewhere to listen to the Lenape songs? That's
no. Oh, well, no, they're not even in the book. No. No. We really haven't published any of the songs. We do sing the songs in the language classes.
Okay.
But
have you done any recordings of oral histories with the people of learning the language or your elders speaking the language?
Have I done any?
Has anyone done recordings to preserve, now that you're bringing the language, into a spoken form again,
right?
To have that audio that kind of moves it forward.
Yeah, the audio comes with the book. There's 4 audio CDs with the book.
There you go.
So it's all the conversations, and then for the
awesome.
The advanced lesson, there's vocabulary lessons, there's verb conjugations.
I'm not going to do those. That's always my downfall.
Yeah, so there's a great deal of language, and as I said, you can order Nora Thompson Dean's lessons. I think it's on the Touching Leaves website. I'm not sure, but if you just type her name in, you can find it. And there's audio to go with hers too. And if you want to hear audio, go to the Lenapehoking dictionary, and the elders are speaking. It's, you know, they're speaking those words.
Okay, and we have that link in the chat, folks. That's talk-lenape.org. That's the Lenape Talking Dictionary. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. What did the letters of the language look like before Europeans came here? So was there a written form of some kind? Okay.
No, we actually thought about that. I mean, it had actually, between what Nora wrote and what Jim Mentor had written over the past 20 years or so, the way they've come about spelling things has now sort of become standardized.
Okay.
But when I was in the early days of trying to put the language together, we did talk about having our own symbols. The Cherokee do that, and other nations do that, but it's just gotten to the point where it's so standardized now that we're kind of sticking with the way they did it.
We have a question about, can you elaborate on the concept of a non-linear language?
Well, the thing is, like, almost every word or sentence, a word becomes a whole sentence. Like, I can tell you another little story. Way back when I first started, I just wanted to say it is da-da, right? And I'm looking, how do you say it is? How do you say it? And I couldn't find it anywhere. And that's because it doesn't exist. Basically, the word for eagle means it is an eagle, okay? And a lot of other little words, they don't have either. You know, the word itself is conceptual. The word for snow means it is snowing. And it can also serve as just snow. That's why when you hear, I don't know about other Native Americans, I know, but our people, when you hear a Native American speaking English, you'll find that their speaking is very choppy because they don't think in a linear fashion. So they'll leave out a lot of those little words, you know, that we have that go in a sentence. So when you're trying to translate, the hardest thing to do is translate from English into Lenape. Okay. And not write originally in Lenape, because it doesn't work that way.
Okay. Let's see here. A lot of people asking about the book. I'll go back to the top and see. I have a question about the kind of the secret practice in the history. You know, some questions about it. Pennsylvania was thought to be a fairly religiously tolerant place, and kind of how that evolved or kind of came to be. Well, in your research, not to put you to speak for the entire world.
No, but yeah, definitely. William Penn, and most of you know him, he was a Quaker. We were very close to the Quakers back then. William Penn was very close to us. We have letters that he wrote to our people, very loving, very friendly letters. And he was very, very respectful towards our people. But he was only here for a year or so, and then he went back to England. Right. And after he passed away, his sons took over, and they were not at all friendly with the Lenape people. So, you know, the persecution started then, was Thomas Penn. We actually have a huge printout of the Gazette. Is it Philadelphia Gazette, Adam? Which Gazette was that? Do you know?
The Pennsylvania Gazette.
Pennsylvania Gazette. You know, they were trying, well, you know about the walking purchase, right? I'm assuming I don't have to go through the walking purchase, but there's even a little blurb in there about how much money they would offer for scalps of women, men, or children, and how, you know, to encourage the genocide, you know, that happened. And just to throw this in, for those of you that have heard of all of this controversy over using redskin names for sporting organizations. And redskin is the way that they referred to these scalps that were offered. That was the currency, redskin. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, so that's one of the reasons we don't like to have people use that particular word. Excuse me. But then I've gone around and around, and did I answer the original question?
You did. You did.
Okay.
I'm working my way back up. I apologize. I've got two questions, you know, a lot of questions came in through the chat. So, okay. Okay, here's a good one. I wonder what resources might be available to research the history of a particular area. I don't know what that word is. Particular area with Lenape history. I'm going to assume that that's. I often visit a place in Schuylkill County and have wondered how the Lenape related to certain landmarks or geography. And our questioner also adds, "Thank you so much for sharing all of this."
Particular areas. Well, what I have to tell you is that you need to travel to libraries.
Yeah.
The Easton Library, for example, has a lot of wonderful documents. Swarthmore does too. They have a Quaker section, which has a lot of Lenape Quaker. As far as a book coming out about particular areas, I don't know of one. I mean, I know how Heck Welder dealt with that. He did put out a book too, or he didn't put the book out. Who put the book out? There's Lenape, how Lenape names of places came to be. And in that book, it also discusses, you know, how that came to be. But I'm not aware of any book that targets a specific area. Not to say that they're not out there.
Okay.
But I'm not really aware of them. I know that we traveled, some of my elders, like my one elder came from Allegheny, the Allegheny Mountains. You know, we had to travel to those little libraries and just look in their archives and see what was there, basically. If anyone else is aware, let me know. I would like to know myself, but that's the best.
Right. Well, we will. We'll wait. We'll see if we get any more information and share it along. Here's a question. I know you did a great intro kind of on the history of the, you know, forced migration out of this area and people staying here and holding on to the culture. And so this is talking about, does the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania stay in contact or have a relationship with the federally recognized Lenape in Oklahoma and elsewhere? It's just a question.
Not really. They're pretty much separate. You know, their histories are separate, and
because it was really a break of you know, so we're going back several hundred years at that point of the
federally recognized tribes somewhat think of themselves as the legitimate Lenape tribes. So sometimes they don't hold other tribes as legitimate. But we do have friends. Curtis Zuniga is from the Bartlesville, Oklahoma. There's the Bartlesville tribe and there's the Anadarko tribe. And he has come to our gatherings, and, you know, one of our clan mothers, she's not a member of the Bartlesville tribe, but she is well known by them and respected by them. And she is one of our clan mothers. So we do have some connections with some people.
Personal connections, but there's not an official connection.
No official connection.
Okay, so here's one kind of related. Our questioner says, I've lived in and around Philadelphia my whole life and have been fascinated by the history and language of the Lenape since I was a child, bolstered in part by your work at Swarthmore College, but I've never fully understood how Pennsylvania ended up a state with no formally recognized tribe, especially given the history of religious freedoms and tolerance here. And resilience of other minority communities? Are there efforts to gain state recognition or similar forms of organizing that we can help support? Our questioner asks.
I'm passing this one over to my son because he's on the, if you don't mind, Adam speaking, he's on the committee for state recognition.
Well, if Ruffian doesn't mind, I'll be quick because you're not here to see me, but very briefly, we made an effort a little over 15 years ago, did not go well. We are recently decided to try again and formed a committee, as luck would have it, right before COVID hit. So it's been a long process with all the law offices and everything being shut down. But now that things are starting to speed back up, we are too, and we are making strides towards state recognition. No clear idea how things will turn out yet, but we are hopeful.
Excellent. I think we will continue to report back to the folks, our membership here that are so interested on that. And I know, you know, Adam and I will be talking about many things and lots of work that we're doing together. So we'll stay tuned and have a report back on how all that work is going. Another question, where did that one go? I'm sorry, my form is sliding on me. Okay, I have, let's see. All right, this is, okay, well, I wonder what, sorry, I'm sorry, folks, I'm having trouble seeing my questions. So if someone on staff might be able to expand those for me, I would appreciate it. And Shelley, while I'm waiting for my questions to load, I'll go through my own internal questions that I've been holding off asking. What was you talked about your aha moment or kind of when you were studying Gaelic and you kind of had this epiphany of, you know, learning about the language of your ancestors and learning those words and bringing that language to life. Is there a particular moment on that journey that stands out to you as just, you know, I'm not to drill down to, but just made you feel like, yes, this all came together in this great way, or you discovered something that you didn't know that you were going to find?
I'm not quite sure what you mean, but if I would say, if I had, you know, wonderful moments, the thing is, all I ever wanted to do was teach my people language. And somehow I got on this creator's train and I was taken to Penn and I was taken to Swarthmore and I was, you know, all these things happened that I never expected to happen. But now I must say that the good thing about COVID was that we started Zoom classes.
Right.
And we wanted to teach classes before, and some people did try to come. It was so far. I live in the Poconos. And now we've come full circle, and I'm back teaching my people again. And if I had to say one thing that I'm most proud of, and I haven't even told Chief Chuck this, but what I sincerely wanted to do, and I'm glad that I was able to do, is that he wanted me to translate his prayer so that he could say it in Lenape. And that's, well, he was, you know, struggling with some words in Muncie dialect and stuff, but he wanted to use the dialect that we're using. And that is the epitome of what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be meaningful for our people. I wanted them to say what they needed to say, even if they don't become fluent, even if they just want to learn some prayer terms or grandmother terms. And so it probably the most wonderful thing that I think I've done is to give my chief's prayer back to him in the language.
I think that certainly qualifies as a great moment. Having heard some of his prayer on the last talk, I know, and you know, in the big, just the joy that saying it in the language seemed that you could feel even through the Zoom. So thank you for sharing that with us. Going back to your, did you have any words that you knew from your childhood that kind of, I know not every word, but just some that you might have heard, or little phrases, or was it really?
Not really much, no. I mean, the word Uma came from my great-grandfather, so he must have used that one, because that means grandmother. So he would say that, and he would utter a few expletives. But
Do you teach those in Lenape also?
Yeah, we have the adult version.
There's the adult
version. But my mother wasn't that interested.
Okay.
It seems to go every other generation.
Yeah.
You know? Like your grandparents were interested, but then your mom's not interested, and that kind of thing. So no, I really had to learn it over.
You really had to just kind of start from the very, very beginning. Excellent. Okay. I've got my questions back. Here's kind of moving a little bit off language, but is there any sort of ways people might research their own ancestry? I think that's a big topic now that I've asked it.
Yeah, it's worth addressing. It's very difficult because I've done a lot of genealogical research, and I do keep the rolls for the tribe, and I am on the committee for taking applications and to admit people or not. Most of what we have, well, not most, but a lot of what we have is oral history.
Okay.
And part of our application says, okay, give us your oral history, write down how you know your Lenape. Any little thing might matter.
Okay. And
so we have to review the applications and listen to their oral history. Photographs are also a big deal. Some of them have their grandparents or great grandparents. Okay. But they may have been taught things that they didn't even realize were Lenape.
Interesting. Right.
So from hearing, maybe we like to hear, well, did your grandmother ever teach you anything or say anything, so oral histories are important, and but we are aware, I am aware, I've done research on my area, which is the Poconos.
Okay.
And the German Lenape connection. Chief Bob is from Philadelphia.
Okay.
So he knows those families there. One of our clan mothers is from Easton. This is the woman that I was telling you about that has the rocks.
Yeah.
And what she would say to us in our teaching is that that this remains oral, and she could just spout off names of who were Lenape and who weren't. And she would say that her family told her, you want to play with these, you want to associate with these people, this family,
right,
and not this one, knowing that family was Lenape, so as far as researching goes, it would take me a long time, but there are some things that are indicators depending upon what archives you're looking at. If you're looking at Moravians, a lot of times when they adopted Lenape people, they would give the mother's name to the child. The Lutherans, another thing is that Moravians would baptize a child, a Lenape child, at any age, whereas the Lutherans would not.
Okay.
So, you just have to look through records and know kind of what you're looking for, and you'll find these hints, and then they're not definite. Okay. Then you have to kind of look even deeper. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, you really have to be a detective, and
your oral history is important. And we do have quite a large base of our own ancestors. We have over 400 members now.
Okay.
And with ancestors, and they're all entered into a database. So when people come to me with a question, all I can say is I'll run this through our database and see if I can find a connection for you.
Okay.
So.
Well, we have I think maybe I'll do a few more questions, and then we might wrap up, because we are coming up on 7 o'clock. I do have a few coming back to the language. An interesting question, is the Lenape language gendered?
No. It isn't, well, there's a couple of stories I could tell about that actually, but third person stands for both he and she. So, that isn't distinguished.
Mhm.
There are I, you, and then it's he, she.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. So there's no distinction there.
What about translating Lenape to German, since German settlers and Lenape women were intermarrying fairly early on? I would hope there might be some existing resources on translating the older dialects directly into German.
I'm not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Neither am I.
If you look through the archives, the German archives, I don't speak German, but we did have a historian that was fairly fluent in, it's, back then it's not like German is today. Their old German is like old English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really different.
Yeah. I'm just not an expert on that area, so
Sure,
I'm gonna have to pass on that one.
Okay. Is there a resource for Lenape understanding of plants, like medicinal and edible?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of resources. We have our own too.
Okay.
The thing is, this lady has such a long name and I can never remember it.
That's okay. We won't put you on the spot. We'll follow up with maybe a few of these, because I think plants are kind of something we're really interested in here at Friends of the Wissahickon. And so,
well, that's when Chief Bob and I came down to identify the plants down there on your property. Yes. Many years ago. But no, I'm very interested in plants too. There are certain herbal remedies that I use and a lot of our people use. So we actually have a little coloring book for our children to color the picture and identify the herb. So, but Gladys, and it begins with a T and it's a really long name. She has specifically dealt with Lenape herbs.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then I think this might be a good question to end on, if you're willing, is would you say some Lenape words for us, or phrases?
Would you like me to say a prayer?
Sure. I think we would be honored for you to do that.
Okay. I'll then translate.
Okay.
Kishalaming, Kahela Wanishi Delachkaski up in Yokwe and the Kishquik, got the Gecko Lue. Kenekiha, Kishalaming, Kenekiha, Wemia Wenak Utali and the Kishquik. Kenekihi, Chulensak, Bukwesak, Heat Cook, Bukwesak, Namesak. Wanishi Kishalamiang Elimilan and Oche. Wanishi Mahumsa Wampaneok Eli Milanen Kashakan Ok Kashikan. Wanishi Uma Shawanewok Eli Milanen Tunde Ok Lakswagan. Wanishi Mahumsa Wonjanewok Eli Milanen B Ok Manitowak Ok Wanishi Mahumsa Loanewok Eli Milanen Asen Ok Mahumsa Sakana. Wanishi Lapis Kishilamiang Eli Milanen B Ok Mehimiching. Na Yukwe Ontente Luen. Dear Father, Creator, whose breath we hear in the four winds, truly we are grateful that we can be here on this day. I have something to say. I speak humbly. Help us so that we may walk a good path here on this earth. Watch over us, Creator. Watch over all the good people who have come here today to learn about our language and our people. We thank you, Grandfather East, for the birth of the sun, the moon, and the stars each day, and the birth of all things. We thank you, Grandmother South, for the fire and for all that is the act of living. We thank you, Grandfather West, for the water, for our spirit guides, and for all those things unseen. And we thank you, Grandfather North, for the rock and the solid earth, for our ancestors and the wisdom of the elders. We thank you, Creator, for your guiding light. We thank you, Mother Earth, for your fertility. Thank you again, Creator, because you bring us food and water each day. Wanishi, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelley. That was beautiful. And I so appreciate your time tonight and previously. And I feel we will have to speak again because this is a great topic to continue on. And we have so many folks that are very interested, and we are so honored to be partnering with all of you to keep these conversations going. And I think perhaps there's even an opportunity to follow up on some of these smaller questions that came out tonight that we may or may not have gotten to or wanted to go a little deeper in a follow-up article in our newsletter. I think that would be splendid. So,
and remember, our language is extremely, extremely endangered. I didn't even say that. Very few speakers.
Yes. So this is, you know,
so anyone who wants to take the class, you are very important.
Right. Keeping a language alive and spoken and bringing it even back to life. And it's such a great place for learning the history and the future of your people. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we will be speaking again, and maybe I'll learn a few words and be able to do it. But if past failures are not an indicator of how I'll do in the future with the language. So.
And thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.